As long as you play in the right key, you'll sound good. You just gotta mix up the notes of the scale until you find something that works. If you memorize a bunch of scale fingerings, then you'll play better. Now, don't get me wrong, I love scales, I practice them every day, and while it is certainly true that the collection of notes within a scale have the potential to become great melodies, there is no guarantee that your knowledge of scales is going to automatically translate into memorable and emotionally powerful melodic phrasing. There's nothing wrong with thinking of the collection of notes within a scale as the raw materials for creating a melody, but the truth is, if you aren't fluent in the language of tension and resolution within the context of a key center, then the process of melodic creation is going to be a frustrating hit-or-miss situation, which in the long run is not a very reliable way to construct a melody. If you've been practicing scales but you are still struggling with inconsistent melodic phrasing, it's probably because you don't understand how to organize the emotional spectrum of consonance and dissonance that exists inside of every scale. So let's break it down in today's lesson. How's it going, everyone? I'm Nate Comp from Dimecast, and today's video is the third episode in our series that focuses on creating expressive guitar melodies using the power of emotional contrast. If you missed the first few episodes of this series, we've set up a playlist with all of the previous lessons, so definitely check that out. Today I want to address something that I've noticed over decades of teaching, which is the epidemic of guitar players who think that the process of melodic creation is simply finding an appropriate scale pattern that fits the key of the music and then just kind of winging it. Now, the question of what key are we playing in is a totally reasonable question to ask. But if you are only asking that question so that you can just wiggle your fingers in a fairly random fashion through a bunch of memorized scale shapes, well, you're missing the point, okay? The biggest criticism that I tend to have with a lot of players is that I don't hear any sense of melodic logic within their phrasing. And there's really no sense of intentional resolution within their melodies, and instead it just sounds like random scale noodling with no regard for the emotional impact of the tension notes within the key versus the resolution notes within the key. So with all of that in mind, today's lesson is going to focus on the concept of tonal hierarchy and how to go about organizing the tonal functions of consonance and dissonance that are contained within every scale. This video is going to be a little bit more of a deep dive, and it's going to be a little bit heavier on the music theory side of things. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, leave us a comment below and we will do our best to help you out. All right, let's get right into it. Before we get into specifics, I want to repeat the same quick disclaimer from the previous episode, which is this. Everything that I'm going to cover in this lesson is based on my own personal experience playing music for the past 40 years. These are just my personal opinions about the emotional content that is contained within various forms of musical behavior, but these observations are by no means rules that you are meant to follow. Like I always say to all of my private students, don't take my word for it. Okay? You need to test this stuff and come to your own conclusions. At the end of the day, it is your responsibility to arrive at your own personal understanding of these ideas in a way that resonates with you, because that is how you are going to create great music. Let's say I want to play some melodic phrases using the notes of a C major scale. All right, so here's a C chord, and here's the scale straight up and down. Now, playing up and down the scale like this in stepwise order is great from a technical perspective because it gets you comfortable with the fingering of the scale as well as, the note locations within the key. But this method of practicing scales is not going to put you on the path towards creating great melodic phrases. I know it sounds crazy, but I think that playing through the notes of a scale in stepwise order, straight up and down like this, is actually one of the worst ways to practice a scale if your goal is to create captivating and memorable melodies. To me, that's kind of like reading the dictionary over and over and then expecting to magically turn into Shakespeare, okay? If you want to create great sounding phrases, you have to embrace the fact that not every note in the scale is created equal, okay? Not every note in the key is created equal. The concept of tonal hierarchy begins with the observation that every scale has a built-in spectrum of emotions, and each individual note in the key has a unique personality that is connected to its tonal function. So the first thing you need to do when it comes to tonal hierarchy is to form some very strong opinions about the emotional profile of each individual note within the scale, okay? The assignment that I give to my private students is to come up with at least 3 or 4 different adjectives that you can personally use to define what each note in the scale feels like to you, okay? For example, here's my C chord again, okay? And here's the note G, which is the 5th note in the scale. What does that note really feel like? Now, I have my own way of describing that note, but you need to define the personality of that note in a way that connects with you and your own personal perception of the emotional content that is communicated by that particular sound, okay? How about this one? Here's the note D, which is the 2nd note in the C scale. What does that really feel like? How do you describe that? Now, once again, I have my own way of describing this particular note, but that description is really only valuable to me. I don't want to influence your own interpretation of the emotional content that is communicated by this particular sound, because then I would be robbing you of the process of personally connecting with this scale note in a way that is unique to you as a player, okay? So the first step in tonal hierarchy is to make a list of the unique emotional characteristics that are associated with every note of the scale. And you can take as much time as you need to do this. It's all about trying to really define the unique characteristics of every single scale step. Eventually, you should be able to recognize the defining characteristics of each scale note by ear the moment you hear it. And a great way to get to that point is to practice singing each note of the scale. I'm a huge proponent of the idea of vocalize to internalize. So if you had a C major chord, and I said to you, sing the letter E, which is the 3rd note of the C scale, right? Or if I said to you, here's the C chord, sing the note A, which is the 6th note of the C scale. Eventually, you should be able to do this with every scale note without even thinking about it. You should also practice hearing each scale note internally using audiation. If you've never done this before, you want to think of audiation as the ability to hear a musical sound in your head when there is no music being played. The same way that you can learn to visualize an image in your mind, you can also learn to audiate a musical sound in your mind. We all think in words when it comes to spoken language, but you also need to be able to hear sounds internally when it comes to studying musical behavior. I practice audiation constantly because it helps me to put a sense of meaning to specific sounds. It's like a form of auditory imagination. The analogy I like to use with audiation is picture each note as having a specific flavor. Like if I challenged a world-class chef to a blind taste test, they would immediately be able to spot the flavor profile of different spices like cumin or rosemary or coriander or sage, okay? Well, being able to audiate each note of the scale in your head works exactly the same way. The process of making your own personalized list of unique scale tone characteristics will really drive home the point that I made before, which is the fact that not every note in the scale is created equal, and not every note in the key is created equal. When it comes to creating emotional contrast with these unique characteristics, let's start with this observation. Great melodies have certain notes that are more prominent or more important than others because they are central to the personality of the melody. Okay, these notes are the tonal consonances of the scale, and they tend to occur more frequently because they really clearly define and emphasize the overall key center of the music. For example, in the key of C, if I play all tonal consonances, I'm playing the notes that really identify the overall key center of the music. Now, our ears prefer the sound of tonal consonances because they feel resolved, all right? And these are the scale notes that tend to serve as points of melodic arrival or destinations for melodic motion. To put it simply, a great tonal melody will emphasize the consonant notes of the key because these are the scale notes that feel the best, okay? Tonal consonances feel like they are at rest, and in the context of melodic phrasing, these are the scale notes that create a sense of finality or conclusion. Now, when I bring this up with my students, a lot of people think that I'm implying that, you should only use the tonal consonances from the scale when you're building melodic phrases, but that's not what I'm getting at, okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with playing melodic phrases that only use tonal consonances, okay? Key of C again is all tonal consonances, okay? It's all resolution notes. Right? There's nothing wrong with that, but as I've mentioned before, too much of anything eventually becomes bland and predictable. And if you want to create real emotional contrast, you have to intentionally balance the emotions that are associated with the tonal consonances of the scale, along with the emotions that are associated with the tonal dissonances of the scale. The tonal dissonances of a key are the scale notes that create more of a feeling of ambiguity or restlessness, okay? Here's C major. This note is in a C scale, and so is this one. And so is this one. Okay? Those notes are in key, but they don't feel very resolved. Right? Our ears really notice the sound of tonal dissonances because they feel tense. Right? These are the scale notes that tend to serve as notes of movement or notes of motion when it comes to melodic phrasing. To put it simply, the tonal dissonances within a scale feel unfinished, like they are asking a question. I like to say that every dissonance wants to be a consonance when it grows up, and I often refer to the dissonant notes within a scale as either tendency tones or leading tones because they really feel like they are pushing the melody in a forward direction. Okay, there is a built-in desire to resolve a dissonant note to a consonant note, and this observation is crucial to understanding tonal hierarchy. Okay, every dissonant note within the scale will either fall in pitch or rise in pitch to create resolution. I'm going to be talking about this a lot more in the next episode, where we're going to combine the idea of pitch motion and melodic contour with tonal function. So definitely stay tuned for that episode. When I introduce my private students to the concepts of tonal consonance and tonal dissonance, they will often incorrectly jump to the conclusion that there are only two types of sounds to work with when creating a melody. Consonances sound good, while dissonances sound bad. Well, life is not that simple, and great music is absolutely not that simple. So you need to appreciate the fact that there are varying degrees of consonance in every scale, and there are varying degrees of dissonance in every scale. One important thing to keep in mind regarding the idea of tonal hierarchy is that you should try to avoid using the terms good versus bad, okay? I prefer to use the terms close and distant when talking about the tonal functions of consonance and dissonance, because it helps to eliminate our bias about right notes versus wrong notes, and it really helps to eliminate the idea that dissonance is somehow bad or it's something that should be avoided, okay? You want to view the close to distant spectrum of tonal hierarchy as a way of learning to hear and feel a wide range of emotional sounds, from very resolved to very tense. And your goal is to be able to express those emotions musically using the various shades of consonance and dissonance that are contained within a specific scale or within a specific key. Once you've put together a personalized list of unique scale tone characteristics, then you want to organize all of those personalities in a way that you can effectively practice them. Okay, for me, this is where the concept of tonal hierarchy really comes together. Okay, every scale note has some degree of connection to the overall key center of the music, but it's up to you to figure out where each scale note fits within the hierarchy of the key center as far as the emotional profile. This is what's going to get you to the point in your playing where you can intentionally balance the unique emotional qualities that are associated with each scale note, okay? So begin by asking yourself this, okay? When it comes to labeling the function of each note within a scale, which notes in the scale feel the most resolved? Okay, from there, ask yourself, how can I arrange those tonal consonances in a way that prioritizes the unique emotional content of each note from close to distant? Then ask yourself, what notes in the scale feel the most tense? Okay, and finally, how can I arrange those tonal dissonances in a way that prioritizes the unique emotional content of each note from close to distant? Okay, now here's an example of a tonal hierarchy chart that I made using the notes of the C major scale. So let's take a look at what we've got here. All right, in the center is the note C, because obviously that's, you know, the root note of the key, and it's going to be the most important consonant note to resolve to. You will often hear the root note called a perfect consonance, okay? Outside of that, we have the note G, which is the fifth note of the C major scale. That's also considered a perfect consonance. Then we have the note E, which is the third note of the scale, the major third. You will often hear this note referred to as a soft consonance. It's a consonant note, but it has a slightly different profile than the root of the scale and the fifth of the scale, which is the C and the G, okay? Then we have our mild dissonances. This would be the letter D, which is the second note of the C scale, and then the letter A, which is the sixth note of the C scale. Mild dissonances are exactly what they sound like, notes that are not super offensive to the ear. Okay. Outside of that, we have the note B, which is the seventh note of the C major scale. This is more of a moderate dissonance. And then at the very edge, we have the note F, which is the fourth note in the C major scale. Okay. One interesting thing that you can do right away with this tonal hierarchy chart is to practice playing the notes in this list so that you're no longer playing a C scale in order stepwise, but you're playing it from the inside out and from the outside in tonal hierarchy. So play C, which is a perfect consonance, then G, which is a perfect consonance, E is a soft consonance, all right, D is a mild dissonant, all right, so is A, mildly dissonant, B is a little more noticeably dissonant, that's kind of a moderate dissonance, and then F is really its own kind of personality. Now, instead of going C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, I went C, G, E, D, A, B, F. It's all the notes of the C scale arranged in my personal interpretation of the emotional profile of each note. Now, what if I start from the outside and I work my way back in? Okay, F to B, to A, to D, to E, to G, to C. Okay. You can also look at this tonal hierarchy chart, not just using the letters of the key, but you can also use the interval numbers from the scale. Okay, so instead of thinking C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, you think of the numbered notes within the C major scale, root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in the center, we have the root, then we have the fifth, then the third, And then the mild dissonances are the 2 and the 6 of the key. And then the more noticeable dissonances are the 7 and the 4 of the key. In the first episode of this series, I had played some melodic phrases that I actually created using this idea of tonal hierarchy. So let's take a look at exactly what I did with some of those examples. Okay, so let me set up here's our tonal reference point of C major. I began with what I call a consonant skeleton, which is a melodic phrase that only uses the consonant notes of the scale, which in this case, the consonant notes of a C major scale are a C major triad. So my first phrase sounded like this. Now from there I decided to put some meat on the bones of that consonant skeleton by adding in the 2 mild dissonances from the key. Now when you add the 2 mild dissonances to the consonant skeleton, you get the 5 notes of the C major pentatonic scale. All right, so the second phrase was this one. It's a little bit of dissonance. Then I decided to develop the phrase even further by adding in the more noticeable dissonances of the key. So now I'm using the full 7-note C major diatonic scale, which was this phrase. Okay. Now, depending on the story that I'm trying to tell, I'm going to use different categories. And notice that if I removed all the dissonances from those 2 examples, I'd be back to the consonant skeleton phrase that I started with, right? Okay. So depending on the musical story that I'm trying to tell, I could potentially do dozens of different phrases starting from just this one skeleton. And this is an idea that you can immediately apply to your own melodic phrasing. Write a short consonant skeleton melody, right, using just a few notes, and then figure out what amount of tension you want to add to that phrase. Right? Your own personal threshold for dissonance will determine the unique way that you choose to kind of move through this spectrum of tonal hierarchy, but that's kind of exactly the point. I know what kinds of sounds I like to use, but I can't figure that out for you. Only you can. When you practice like this, you're trying to train your ears and your emotional instincts to make very intentional choices that have a specific emotional impact, which is the total opposite of just winging it and playing random scale notes and meandering phrases. A question that pops up a lot when I teach this concept is, what if the melodic story that I'm trying to tell needs an emotional quality that I can't seem to find anywhere in the scale? Okay, in other words, what if the flavor profile that I'm looking for is oregano, but I can't seem to find that flavor anywhere on the spice rack that we call the key of the music? All right, well, this is my favorite part of tonal hierarchy, which is where we expand our color palette to include every possible melodic sound and not just the notes that are in the key. This means that your next step is to form some very strong opinions about the emotional profile of each individual note that is not in the scale. You want to come up with at least 3 or 4 specific adjectives that you can personally use to define what every note that is not in the scale feels like to you. Now, you'll find that labeling the unique personality of these notes is a little more difficult, and singing these notes as well as audiating these notes is also going to be much more of a challenge, but that's okay. Remember that there is no time limit or expiration date when it comes to learning this stuff, so take as long as you need. Once you've got your personalized list of unique characteristics together, then you want to organize these new personalities in a way that you can effectively practice them. So here's what my tonal hierarchy chart for C major looks like when you include all of the notes that are not in the key. Now, there's a couple new categories of tension here, okay? The first extra category is what I call the chromatic blues dissonances. These are the notes that are outside of the major scale and tend to have a bluesier sound to them. All right. Outside of that, we have what I like to call the exotic dissonances. Okay. These are the notes that are outside of the key center that really create a unique type of tension or a unique type of dissonance not normally associated with a major key center. At the very edge of this chart is the microtones or the quarter tones, the notes that sit in between the notes that are not actually identifiable in the regular musical alphabet. Okay, an example of microtones would be if I have on top of my C chord the note E, which is the major third, and I have the note E flat, which is the minor third of the flatted third. If I bend that E flat just a little, it's not quite E flat or E. It's this weird kind of out of tune sound. Okay, this is the most noticeable type of dissonance in all of music. All right, so we've got consonances in the center, degrees of dissonance out to the edge, and at the very edge is microtonal or slightly out of tune sounds. Okay, now what happens if I decide to build a phrase using some of these more adventurous or more dramatic types of functions of dissonance? Okay, well, back in the first episode, the last phrase that I had played sounded like this, using these more kind of interesting sounding dissonances. And you can tell by the color coding of this that I'm really going out there, but I'm really also trying to emphasize the points of resolution that I established with the original consonant skeleton. As a matter of fact, you'll notice with this last phrase, even if I remove all of the dissonant notes, okay, and there's a lot of them, even if I remove all the dissonances, I'm still back to that consonant skeleton that I started with, okay? One of my favorite quotes from Bill Evans, the legendary piano player, is that there are no wrong notes, only wrong resolutions. The concept of tonal hierarchy and the organization of unique emotional qualities is an idea that can be applied to any scale that you learn. And I'm really just scratching the surface here as far as how much can be done with just this one concept. So I'll be coming back to this topic quite a bit in future videos. One thing that I've come to realize after years of working on this idea is that every scale contains a unique collection of consonants and dissonance. And every great melody uses some unique combination of consonance and dissonance. Another thing that I've come to realize is that all of my favorite musicians use this kind of thinking in one form or another when they want to intentionally provoke a wide range of emotions in their melodic phrasing. And even if they don't use the label of tonal hierarchy to describe what they are doing, every great player has an instinctual understanding of the emotional value of the notes that they play, no matter what you want to call it. I've mentioned it before, but sounds and emotions come first when you are studying musical behavior, which means things like ear training and vocalization and audiation, that has to come first. And then the specific language of music theory can come after that. The final thing I want to mention is this. I've dedicated decades of my life to learning as much as I possibly can about how music really works. And a big part of my own personal journey has been studying the real-life practices of the best musicians and then trying to figure out exactly what they are doing and why. All right, so my aim as a teacher is to find the specific things that make great music so captivating and engaging, and then use the musical principles that I've discovered kind of out in the wild to craft lessons that will get results for my students. Along with what I've learned from doing transcriptions of all of the greatest players, I've also been heavily influenced by many brilliant methods developed by people like Paul Hindemith or Arnold Schoenberg, Vincent Persichetti, Joseph Schillinger, George Russell in particular, Hal Galper, David Liebman, the amazing Mick Goodrick, and of course the legendary Barry Harris. Okay, my point here is that both Byron and I are standing on the shoulders of giants when we teach these kinds of concepts. And the whole purpose of this channel is to take all of the combined wisdom that we have gained over years of teaching and distill those experiences down to practical methods that you can immediately apply to your own playing. If you would like a copy of the diagrams that I used in this video, send a message to info@dimecast.com and let us know. We'll email you a link where you can download a PDF file that has all of the diagrams that I used for the C major scale as well as the full chromatic scale. If you enjoyed this lesson, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.